This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
ICC prosecutor seeks probes into Nigeria war crimes by Boko Haram fighters. The political crisis deepens in the DRC as President Tshisekedi seeks to scrap ruling coalition. And 5 years on since Paris Climate Agreement was signed, what has changed for Africa? Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahai Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour, MTN suspends sales of new SIM cards in Nigeria as government embarks on an audit of subscribers. And in sport, Bayern Munich star Lewandowski up against Messi and Ronaldo for FIFA Best Men's Player of the Year award. The International Criminal Court prosecutor has called for a formal inquiry into war crimes and crimes against humanity in Nigeria. This follows a decade-long investigation into violence in the northeast involving Boko Haram militants. Fatou Bensouda said in a statement that the vast majority of crimes were by what she termed as non-state actors, although Nigerian security forces also need to be probed. She also said after 10 years of investigations, the situation in Nigeria has met the required criteria for an inquiry. Well, Boko Haram was founded in 2002. At first, it was a non-violent religious movement that advocated for purification of Islam in northern Nigeria. However, following the arrest and killing of its founder, Mohammed Yusuf, in 2009, the new leader, Abu Bakr Shekau, radicalized and aligned it with Al-Qaeda. He would later begin a military campaign against the Nigerian government. Boko Haram is blamed for high-profile attacks on civilian and security installations, including the recent killing of at least 110 rice farmers in Borno State. It also claimed responsibility for the kidnap of over 200 Chibok schoolgirls in January 2016. The group's campaign has led to deaths of thousands of locals and security agents and displacement of over 30,000 people in northern Nigeria. Well, let's now get you more on that story. I'm now joined live via Zoom by Tolu Akerele, counterterrorism, cybersecurity and data protection consultant. Tolu, why has it taken this long for the ICC to seek full war crimes probe into the Nigerian conflict?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. So this is a difficult question because often it's very tricky to meddle in state affairs. Nigeria is obviously a massive power on the African continent, and it's always very delicate with the oil and with the relations to go for either Nigerian security forces or the insurgent actors themselves. So I think this is why it's taken some time. We have to bear in mind that the Nigerian security forces, although there are some flaws in the system, they aren't committing atrocious acts against humanity intentionally. So they may be acting under duress. There are times where we see that the military buys their own uniforms. As such, uniforms and kits can fall into the wrong hands. There's a lot of impersonation of military personnel. So you can never really tell whether it's actually the Nigerian security forces or insurgents posing as the Nigerian military.
Now, if the government there has been unable to bring the perpetrators to justice, how then will the ICC be able to do so, considering it's also facing criticisms over its own credibility?
Good question. Thank you. I think that it has to be handled very delicately because for the ICC to target low-level insurgents of Boko Haram, this is counterproductive in my opinion, because they're most likely members who have joined under duress. It's a kill or be killed. So in that sense, it's more up to the Nigerian state to win the hearts and minds of the population, the local populace, because as you mentioned, Boko Haram recently just slaughtered over 100 rice farmers on the outskirts of Maiduguri in the suburbs. And this is because one civilian gave intelligence to the army. So if you now start prosecuting and targeting civilians that really only joined because it's either life or death situation, then I don't think it will be very effective in that sense.
And finally, Tolu, what impact will these developments then have on the overall fight against the insurgency?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I think it may actually set things back slightly because the best approach now is a joint regional approach with neighbors like Cameroon, Chad, Benin. So we're looking at multinational joint task forces. The ICC could actually model this situation if they continue with such unsubstantiated claims like the military has forcibly conscripted minors under 15. You've got to understand also that the military has a lot of PTSD in the ranks. They're coming up against child soldiers. I know one of the special commanders for the special forces, he had to kill a 9-year-old who killed his best friend. It's a kill or be killed situation again. So I think the ICC has to tread very carefully. There needs to be copious amounts of evidence, and they need to know exactly who they're prosecuting and for what. So I think in terms of crimes against humanity, we're looking at the military committing crimes against IDP, that's internally displaced people. But this happens again all over the world. We've seen it with Red Cross, Oxfam. So I think the ICC has to tread carefully and really target the insurgents that are creating the most havoc. We're looking at ISWAP, the Islamic State in West Africa. We're looking at Boko Haram leaders, Abu Bakr Shekau. We're looking at the top leaders, not the low-level insurgents, which are easy picking, so to speak, low-hanging fruit.
All right. Thank you very much for your insights there, Tolu Akerele, who is a counterterrorism, cybersecurity, and data protection consultant, joining us live there. Now, moving on, Saturday is the 5th anniversary of the Paris Climate Agreement, and the United Nations is marking it by holding a Climate Ambition Summit. Secretary General Antonio Guterres and world leaders, including Chinese President Xi Jinping, will gather virtually to set out ambitious new climate change commitments. On Friday, France hosted a zero-carbon online forum with mayors of cities worldwide, reaffirming their climate pledges. EU leaders have also announced that their new climate target after marathon talks in Brussels. They agreed to increase the bloc's emission reduction goal to 55% by 2030. Well, 5 years since the signing of the Paris Agreement, several African countries have tried to play their part in tackling climate change by implementing small-scale interventions. However, a lot more still needs to be done. Earlier, we spoke to Chukwumerije Okerere, a professor of global environmental and climate governance, on this subject.
One of the most outstanding impacts of climate change is in the area of agriculture and food production. You see, because of Africa's location very close to the equator and being a tropical continent, Africa's temperature has been rising faster than the global mean temperature. And the consequence of this is that there has been a huge variation in rainfall pattern, and most parts of Africa have been experiencing shorter periods of rainfall and longer periods of dry season. The consequence of this has been a lot of drought and a lot of poor performance of our agricultural outputs. Another main area, but is the incidence of extreme weather events. And the third big area is through flooding. Africa is experiencing a lot of flooding, and that is resulting in massive displacement of people. In some cases, the entire states or communities have been sacked by flooding. And this also has resulted in serious socioeconomic consequences for many, many countries and communities across Africa. There are a range of different things that should be done. Number one, African countries need to fully understand the nature of impacts that are currently being experienced and the future projected impact. This means investing heavily in science, in climate modeling, climate prediction, to be able to understand the current and future dimensions of impact. So we need planning not only at national level, but also at subnational and local levels. And quite frankly, also, Africa needs to intensify their advocacy to attract finance, technology, and capacity building resources from the developed countries to enable them to implement their plan.
Moving on, lawmakers in the Democratic Republic of Congo have removed the Speaker of Parliament from office. Janine Mabunda was removed in a vote that went well into the night on Thursday. Her removal has been hailed as a major victory for President Felix Tshisekedi, who's on a mission of asserting his authority after breaking up the ruling coalition that he jointly led with former President Joseph Kabila. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
DRC Speaker Janine Mabunda was voted out of office by MPs who accused her of violating the Constitution and parliamentary rules. She's been in office for 1 year and 7 months. Hundreds of supporters of President Tshisekedi gathered outside Parliament to follow the proceedings. Clashes broke out between the police and some of the supporters who tried to force their way into Parliament.
We mothers are saying enough is enough. Janine Mabunda has really ashamed us by the way she led affairs in Parliament. We want her to leave.
This lady has already been removed from office. Let her go back home, enter her kitchen and cook food. She's not fit to lead our parliament.
Her ouster comes 4 days after President Tshisekedi announced an end of the ruling coalition that's been beset by internal wrangling. The motion to remove the Speaker of Parliament, Janine Mabunda, is part of a bigger power struggle between President Felix Tshisekedi and his predecessor, Joseph Kabila. Mabunda is an ally of Kabila and has been accused of frustrating the president's efforts to push reforms through Parliament. Last year, President Tshisekedi signed a power-sharing deal with his predecessor, Joseph Kabila, after failing to get a majority in Parliament. But their FCC cash coalition has been rocked by differences over the appointment of judges and the management of other government institutions.
When you go to our parliament, you'll find that most of the MPs belong to the FCC alliance of Joseph Kabila. President Tshisekedi believes the only way he can succeed to make reforms in the country is by removing the speaker who is allied to Kabila. Once he does so, he'll be able to remove the prime minister who is also from Kabila's side.
On Tuesday, clashes broke out between MPs allied to President Tshisekedi and their rivals from Joseph Kabila's camp after the petition to remove the speaker was filed. The head of the UN peacekeeping mission in the DRC condemned the violence and urged the leaders to resolve their differences peacefully. The DRC witnessed its first peaceful handover of power last year after a long delayed election, but the breakup of the country's ruling coalition has caused a deeper crisis that's threatening to return the country to chaos. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. Stay with us here on the program. Here's what's coming up. We bring you an update on the coronavirus pandemic and the ongoing quest for vaccine approval. And later in our Made in Africa series, how one Senegalese artist is mixing hip-hop beats with traditional music.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live, Find your voice.
Live. And let's take you to South Africa now, where the country's health ministry says the country is now experiencing a second wave of COVID-19 infections. The Western Cape has been identified as one of the regions behind the new spike in coronavirus cases. Authorities there are concerned as the rising cases have put more pressure on public healthcare facilities. CGTN's Travers Andrews has the details.
The Western Cape has been deemed a COVID-19 hotspot due to a major spike in infections. This has left both the national and provincial governments worried. Out of more than 836,000 people who have been infected nationally, 30% are from the Western Cape. The daily infection rate has also surpassed over 8,000 in just 24 hours. Now authorities believe that a second COVID-19 wave has arrived, and Cape Town is one of the worst affected regions.
The Western Cape is having a very dramatic resurgence in cases, and at the moment it's driven largely by an outbreak and resurgence in the Garden Route, but in fact also virtually all of the metropole. So for example, we have seen our active cases at the moment rise to over 11,000 active cases.
Experts believe that a number of factors led to this latest rise in infections, including super spreader events that often lead to increased community spread. Non-compliance with COVID-19 safety regulations has also worsened the situation. Now the healthcare system is beginning to feel the effects of a rapidly increasing infection rate.
At the end of September, we were seeing under 500 cases in our hospitals, public and private, in the Western Cape. At the moment, we are sitting just over 1,200 people in hospitals, in public and private. And that is throughout the province as well, where we're seeing that increase in cases in hospitalizations as well.
The government is particularly concerned about the prevalence and transmission of COVID-19 among teenagers. It's an issue some teenagers feel strongly about.
It's known that coronavirus might not affect us as much as it will affect our vulnerable elders at home, because us, we are just carriers. And then as carriers, we go to events. I feel like teenagers should just take a stand.
We have to think of our families, but also I feel like teenagers are tired of staying at home because we've been at home since March, but that doesn't give them the right to not think about other people.
But I am concerned that we'll get another lockdown and it will lead to lots of unemployment and people will suffer from job loss and that sort of thing. That's the main thing I'm concerned about, the economic aspect.
Authorities hope to curb the resurgence of the virus through behavioral change. They want to do this by insisting on mask wearing, social distancing and hand sanitization. The law enforcement agencies will also be roped in to drive home that important public health message. Authorities say they're also concerned about the role alcohol is playing in pressuring the healthcare system, because patients admitted for alcohol-related trauma are competing for beds with patients admitted for COVID-19. Now that the festive season is getting underway, the situation is likely to be compounded, putting even further pressure on the already strained healthcare facilities. Travers Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Meanwhile, the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has appealed to the global community to assist African countries with COVID-19 vaccines. It also said the continent must prepare itself to quickly and safely distribute vaccines across its member states. Here is CGTN's Girum Chala with more on that story.
Africa is considering at least 3 COVID-19 vaccine candidates to be used across the continent. They include the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, but the continent also faces the challenge of putting together proper cold storage chains for distribution of vaccines across member states.
The Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine require stringent storage conditions that are -20 and -70. That by itself becomes a challenge in the supply chain distribution. But it doesn't stop us from establishing vaccination points in capital cities, okay, and start with that. I think the key thing is that we need to start, I think, rather than get ourselves completely grounded.
Many worry Africa might lag behind when it comes to getting COVID-19 vaccines on time. The Africa CDC says this can also become a moral issue.
The world watches Africa not receiving vaccines and see the global north getting the vaccines. I think that would really create a moral issue. I think that there's no word to describe that. I mean, the real word is we get ourselves into a moral dilemma.
The African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says it's time the world fulfills the promises of solidarity with the continent by helping Africans get vaccines as soon as possible.
In order to position Africa to reintegrate into the global economy, which requires movement of people, the vaccines become so central. So we find ourselves at a pivotal moment in the history of our continent where without access to these vaccines in a timely fashion and equitable manner, we will be, our whole developmental process will be challenged. So, I mean, that is an appeal that the whole discourse around equity, ethics, cooperation, solidarity that has characterized this pandemic and call to action should be implemented now.
Currently, 2.3 million coronavirus cases have been reported across Africa. That is 4.5% of total cases reported across the world. Africa also has an 89% total recovery rate. About 1.9 million people out of the 2.3 million who were infected have already recovered. Unfortunately, people continue losing their lives in Africa due to the COVID-19 pandemic. 54,000 people have died so far here. Some say that figure is not that bad when compared to the death of about 1.5 million people that were recorded globally. Grumtara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, over the past year, up to 200 teams have been researching vaccines worldwide. Now, different types of vaccines are in use, but not all of them have been approved the conventional way. U.S. authorities have followed the U.K. and Canada in allowing Pfizer-BioNTech to be used. Yolo Abdafit looks at the various vaccines becoming available.
A pandemic year has galvanized scientists to find answers in how to deal with COVID-19. One of those sought-after answers is a vaccine to protect people and whether everyone should take it.
I don't think we envision any countries creating a mandate for vaccination. There may be some countries or some situations in countries where there are professional circumstances where it would be required to be vaccinated or where it would be highly recommended to be vaccinated.
A combined US-German effort by Pfizer-BioNTech is the first officially approved vaccine in the Western world. Inoculation started in the UK and is being rolled out in Canada. Vaccines by Moderna and Oxford AstraZeneca are in the process of being analysed and tested and could be used soon. Tens of millions of doses are on order in the UK, the US, Mexico and Europe. China's Sinopharm vaccine is 86% effective, says the United Arab Emirates. It's the first foreign country with plans to use the vaccine. Morocco may follow, and it's been distributed to 1 million people in China in an emergency program. Another Chinese vaccine is Sinovac's CoronaVac. It's arrived in Indonesia, ready for mass vaccination. A second batch of 1.8 million doses are due to arrive by January. It's been trialled in Brazil. Russia was one of the first countries to announce it was developing its Sputnik V vaccine. It was approved in August after 16,000 volunteers were involved in clinical trials, and it's claimed to be 92% effective.
Moscow is absolutely ready for this vaccine. We have a solid logistical plan to make sure it can be transported from the suppliers to the vaccination centres.
In the race to vaccinate people, wealthier countries have already booked hundreds of millions of doses of various vaccines. The concern is that poorer states will, once again, be left behind.
I reiterate my call for a COVID-19 vaccine to be a global public good, available to everyone, everywhere, and particularly available in Africa.
Different technologies and different types of vaccines are being developed much faster than the average 8 to 10 years. Such has been the economic impact of COVID, and because 1.5 million people have died from the virus so far. Yolo Abdavid, CGTN, London.
Well, it's just about time for the business headlines here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. MTN suspends sales of new SIM cards in Nigeria as government embarks on an audit of subscribers. And South African airlines struggle to get back to business after COVID-19 restrictions.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
We begin the business stories in Nigeria, where MTN says it has suspended the sale and activation of new SIM cards. This after an order from the country's telecoms regulator, which is conducting an audit of mobile users, a move affecting all network providers. The Nigerian Communications Commission says it has embarked on an audit of the country's subscriber registration database. This comes off the heels of a similar exercise conducted in September last year. Nigeria is MTN's largest market, contributing about a third of the group's earnings, and looks set to grow in importance as the group pursues a strategy shift that includes focusing more on the continent. The group announced in August that it will be exiting the Middle East with its first divestment of its 75% stake in MTN Syria. Now, a long-standing dispute between the Egyptian government and an Italian-Spanish energy company has been resolved, allowing for the reopening of an Egyptian natural gas liquefaction plant after an 8-year closure. The move followed a protracted dispute between Union Fenosa Gas, which is a coalition of Italy's Eni and Spain's Naturgy Energy. Yasser Hakim brings us the details.
The deal that has been finally struck is good news for the natural gas industry in Egypt. The Damietta liquefaction plant, one of 2 in Egypt, has been shut down since 2012 due to the volatility and unrest that followed the 2011 uprising. UFG, a partnership of Italian oil giant Eni and Spain's Naturgy, had a majority stake in the plant. They went to court in 2014 for a $2 billion compensation from the Egyptian government.
The Damietta plant has a liquefaction unit that produces 5 million tons of gas every year, and that has lost revenue for years. This situation harmed Naturgy and Union Fenosa Gas financially, and that's why they sought international arbitration for contract violation and to make up for the huge losses.
The new deal entails that Eni and the Egyptian government split ownership of the LNG plant. In return for dropping the case, Naturgy will exit Egypt, taking $600 million and several UFG assets as compensation. The Damietta facility is vital for the North African country's ambitions to become a natural gas hub in the East Mediterranean.
First, Egypt will not need to import liquefied gas anymore, so it will save about $120 million a month from its budget. When the plant works on full capacity, it will create a badly needed hard currency income by exporting to the East Mediterranean and Europe. Also, when operational, the plant will create employment opportunities and help improve living conditions in the surrounding Damietta area.
The Damietta LNG plant is expected to reopen in the first quarter of 2021, consolidating Egypt's position as a main gas producer and exporter in the region. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, the South African aviation industry is at the moment in a state of flux. Carriers in Africa's most industrialized economy have been forced to either go bankrupt or file for business rescue as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But with the restrictions now being lifted, CGTN Sumitra Naidu takes a look at what airlines like the recently launched Lift are doing to capitalize on the resurgence of air travel in South Africa.
It's an important week for a number of airlines in South Africa who are getting back in the air after one of the sector's toughest years. There's even a new airline that's entering the local market.
Feels like it's always the right time to do things right, and we want to do things right in the airline industry. It's we need to be very flexible because demand is very uncertain, and we need to be able to scale up and scale down as demand dictates. But I think industries are always ready for something fresh and new.
We're much more relaxed airline, as you can see with our outfits. They wanted to go for the feel of the cabin crew being comfortable because we'll be busy. So it's a much more relaxed look.
Lift's model is not price sensitive but based rather on the customer experience, focusing on flexibility and efficiency. But aviation experts say a price war will ensue as airlines fight to get bumps on seats.
Initially, we thought Lift was going to compete on price. Now it seems to be competing more on flexibility and tailored product offering rather than on price. I think that Giron Novak, the CEO of Lift, was correct when he says he doesn't want to engage in a race to the bottom on price.
While both new and old airlines pull out all the stops to focus on South Africa's lucrative routes, old competitor South African Airways will remain grounded. Government is trying to secure a private equity partner for the state-owned entity. SAA may get back in the sky before year-end, but will have stiff competition.
The market is pretty overtraded. We've seen all the airlines with massive capacity getting back into the market, vying for market share with the new entrants like Airlink on these routes. And we're in a price war already, which is obviously very bad for airlines. It's, the prices are back to what they were pre-COVID, and yet the airlines are sitting with massively damaged balance sheets and huge debt. So we're going to see a price war for, my guess, is the next 6 to 9 months.
Former regional feeder Airlink has also entered the market, concentrating on the Golden Triangle, Cape Town, Johannesburg and East London. It's all great news for travellers, but another wave of COVID infections in South Africa could upset all of the airline's sustainability. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And it's time for us to take another short break, but here's what's coming up when we return. We tell you how one Senegalese artist is mixing hip-hop beats with traditional music.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Let's now turn to Senegal to learn more about West African griots. In various countries across the region, griots are a part of an ancient class. They encompass poets, storytellers, and musicians who pass their craft from one generation to the next. Numukunda Sissoko is a musician who comes from a long line of Senegalese griots. He's made a name for himself by mixing the traditional kora, a 21-string instrument, with hip-hop beats.
Moi, c'est la musique qui me parle. Je suis né dans la musique, donc mon père, ma mère, hein, la musique. C'est tout ce que j'ai, c'est tout ce que j'ai appris, c'est tout ce que j'ai à faire. C'est ça que seulement que je peux faire. Je connais rien que la musique. Donc ça, c'est comme quelque chose de grandiose pour moi. Ça, c'est vraiment ma passion. Je veux toujours être un artiste. Je m'appelle Numukunda, griot traduit moderne. Bienvenue au Sénégal, pays de la Teranga. Jërëjëf. Je suis né, comme je dis, je suis né une très grande famille qui faisait que le traditionnel. Donc en sortant d'écouter les autres musiques, c'est ça qui m'a influencé d'écouter du rap, comme je te dis, du ngueros, du house, du salsa, du hip-hop. Ça, du reggae, c'est du mélange. Ça m'a vraiment influencé. Je voulais faire d'autres choses que rester toujours ma traditionnelle. Mais j'ai toujours imposé un peu ma traditionnelle, fait un peu ça, tout ce que je pourrais le donner en moderne. Dire que je ne vais pas rester sur le... Je reste dans le traditionnel, aussi en donnant la kora, possibilité que les gens le découvrent, en mettant du traditionnel, un peu de hip-hop, mais rester toujours du traditionnel. Bienvenue à la grande famille. Ça, c'est la grande maison de Banaya Family. Donc, c'est ici que tout s'était passé, qu'on a appris à jouer la kora ici, qu'on a appris à danser, nos mamans ici, toute la famille ici. Donc, tu verras vers 16h, 17h, comme ça, tu vas voir nos enfants, la famille, tu vois, ils sont devenus grands, ils vont jouer, ils vont faire tout. C'est ici. Tout. J'ai appris ici. Ce petit endroit-là, c'est ici la grande maison. Voilà, encore je te dis, vous êtes bienvenus. Celle-là, c'est ma fille avec sa copine. Là, ils vont aller à un spectacle. Ils viennent de se réveiller. Même en réveillant, elle va chanter. Elles sont là. Même derrière, il y a Taco, il y a Timon, il y a Bana. Abi, Noël. Il y a un peu de deux, parce qu'il y en a beaucoup qui sont restés jouer le traditionnel sans essayer de voir d'autres musiques ouvertes. Mais si tu as la possibilité d'essayer de faire d'autres musiques, que ce soit le classique, jazz, tu vois, donc ça te permet d'aller un peu plus loin. Donc le moment, c'était dur que ma famille vont comprendre. Mais le moment que je suis parti en tournée et j'arrivais avec beaucoup de l'argent et je l'ai placé à mon père a regardé, mais tu fais quoi? Je dis, c'est du musique, du rap que je fais. C'est tout cet argent-là? Je dis oui. Il me dit, ah bon, donc tout ce que tu fais, si tu le fais avec un âme, donc alhamdulillah. J'ai choisi deux instruments, la kora et les percussions, parce que c'est ces deux choses qui m'ont vraiment influencé. C'est ces deux choses, j'ai eu les deux diplômes, parce que c'est ces deux choses que j'ai aimées. Donc, mais après, je suis fidèle avec la kora, tu vois, parce que la percussion, il y a trop aussi le physique qui tape, quelque chose. Rapidité, ça m'a donné un peu d'élan avec la corde. Donc, j'ai un peu diminué les percus et je suis resté avec la kora. Donc la kora est devenue une chose que j'ai vraiment aimée, ma première femme. Comme je te dis, vous êtes arrivé avec la grande famille. Ça, c'est la nouvelle génération. Il y avait l'ancien qui était là, mon frère Diabel qui vient à Londres. Donc on est là, on va s'amuser. Les percus, on va s'amuser. Dans une famille griot, on n'organise même pas. Venez tôt. Tout ça vient naturel. On a des heures qu'on va commencer, on va jouer, voir des trucs qu'on peut changer ensemble. Donc on va le faire. Tu vas voir chaque personne, ce qu'il aime, il va toucher ça. Si c'est le doudou, si c'est la kora, si c'est le balafon, chaque individu. Donc c'est ça le flow. Donc il nous voit tout faire, jouer, danser. Il reprend la même chose. Dès qu'ils ont besoin de quelque chose, eux, tu peux pas. C'est ça le... On est bien arrivé chez moi, chez la grande famille. Cette lieu est très important pour nous, Mukunda, parce que c'est là où son père a appris à jouer la kora. Ça, c'est son oncle, la famille Diabaté. Donc, venez bien. Ouais. Donc, ce lieu représente le Mukunda. Comme je fais une musique aujourd'hui, c'est une musique mandingue. Et cette musique mandingue vient d'où? De Tambacounda. Donc mes parents viennent d'ici. Ils jouent des djembé, du kora, des guitares traditionnelles, du ngoni, tu vois. Donc ma musique, si tu entends Mukunda, tu vois ma influence dans ma musique, tu entends Tambacounda. Comme je te dis, le lieu est tellement multiple pour moi. Mon premier album, il s'appelle Tambacounda, parce que c'est pour l'importance de ce pays que ma musique est influencée dessus. Bon, je débat tous les sujets, que ce soit non à la violence, non à la guerre, la paix, les enfants, tu vois, c'est important. Je parle de la société, tu vois, comment on vit. Et puis partout où je vais aussi, partout dans le monde, les sujets qui chose, ce que j'ai raconté, j'essaie de dire ce que je pense. Donc, un peu, je ne suis pas politique, mais je parle un peu en Afrique, ce qui se passe. Donc, sans faire le politique. Donc, il y a tous les sujets que je débatte dans ma musique, toutes les influences que je pense. Si je le dis, ça peut faire quelque chose. Oui. Je vais vous montrer un très bon souvenir de mon papa. Je n'étais même pas né. Venez voir. Comme je vous là, c'est mon papa. Tu vois, il est né dans une très grande famille musicienne. Depuis des siècles, cette famille, c'est des griots. On a hérité que ça. On connaît que de la musique. Donc, tu vois, cette photo, je n'étais même pas né du tout. Donc, on est hérité que de la musique. Voilà. Ça, c'est le papa. Ça date, hein. Oui, comme je te dis, quand j'étais enfant, j'ai copié mon père, qu'il soit guitariste, percussion, danseur. Je l'ai vu faire, donc je l'ai pris, quoi. J'ai pris le même chemin, tu vois. Je danse, je joue la kora, je chante, donc je l'ai copié, quoi. Donc c'était presque mon idole, quoi, mon papa.
L'Afrique, nous, en ce moment, l'Afrique était divisée en royaumes. Bon, l'autre royaume avait comme la guitare traditionnelle qu'on appelait le ngoni. D'autres avaient les tambours. Dans le côté mandingue, on avait la kora. La kora, c'est un instrument traditionnel africain. Un instrument royal. Si je dis royal, c'est-à-dire, c'est un instrument que j'ai toujours pour les rois. Comme l'Afrique, ça tourne. Le kora était l'instrument messager. Vraiment, elle a vu le jour vers le XIVe siècle. Mais avant qu'elle ne soit kora, elle était d'abord kora. Mais kora pas au même sens qu'aujourd'hui. Parce qu'avant, elle était de 4 à 6 cordes. Mais aujourd'hui, elle se retrouve à 23 cordes. Donc cet instrument est un instrument noble. Elle est légitime d'une famille royale. Et le griot qui le joue aussi, c'est un griot complètement à part entière, un griot noble. Un griot noble, c'est un griot qui est vraiment griot. C'est la raison pour laquelle la kora elle était un instrument très fascinant pour l'Afrique. Voilà.
Non, je rêve d'être vraiment quelqu'un vraiment connu et célèbre aussi, tu vois. Être quelqu'un vraiment que je serais un exemple, quoi. Donc, c'était mes rêves. Aujourd'hui, Dieu a fait que je suis en train de faire un peu réussite, un peu. Je ne vais pas dire encore. Je rêve d'être quelqu'un vraiment qui peut aider, qui peut donner socialement, qui peut donner et puis faire quelque chose aussi, que c'est un référent. Donc, des grands, je ne sens que je suis dans le chemin, je touche du bois, je veux que ça continue jusqu'à mes rêves pourraient se réaliser, Inch'Allah.
And here's what's coming up in the sport.